Welcome to the Ice Guys, presented by the Hockey Podcast Network. Saturday, June 12th, Ian Cameron with you. We're standing by for Alex B. Smith. We'll see. Hopefully he's able to join us during the show. But if not, it'll just be me today, ready to break down the, I was going to say the Saturday card. I'm so used to saying that because you start the show with the same intro. You have the same kind of shtick that you say at the beginning of every episode. I'm ready to just say breaking down the Saturday card. Well, there is no Saturday card to break down in the NHL today. Obviously, we are getting ourselves ready for the Stanley Cup semifinals, which come your way starting tomorrow. We will talk Game 1 of the Tampa Bay Lightning New York Islanders series, Game 1 Sunday afternoon. And then, of course, we will also preview the two series overall in the semifinal round, Tampa Bay New York Islanders, as well as Vegas and Montreal. There will be no Ice Guys show tomorrow, so make sure you are aware of that. I don't want anybody checking in on the YouTube channel around noon Eastern expecting a show when there isn't one. So we got to get that out there to everybody right now that there will be no Ice Guys show tomorrow on Sunday. We will be back Monday, though, 2 p.m. Eastern, our regular Monday to Friday time, 2 p.m. Eastern on Monday, and we'll talk Game 1 Montreal-Vegas on that show. All right, so let's talk series previews for me. You heard Jimmy's thoughts yesterday. You didn't hear a lot from me on these two series. I'll give you my overall series thoughts here. Tampa Bay Lightning, New York Islanders. As we mentioned on yesterday's show, Tampa Bay around -300 series favorite. You can get about +240 on the New York Islanders with the take back. I think the Islanders are competitive in this series. If you can find props, like over 5.5 games, over 6.5 games, I wouldn't hate those. I do think the Islanders are going to be a competitive team. I don't know if I could go as far as to think that to take them in the series or to think that they're going to win the series, because when you look at the Tampa Bay Lightning, they can just do so much more than either Boston or Pittsburgh could offensively, with the way that they have just incredible depth 1 through 4 with their 4 lines, with 1 through 12 with their 12 forwards. I mean, it's just an incredibly deep team offensively. One night, Braden Points obviously had an outstanding playoff so far. There's no question in my mind he is going to be if Tampa Bay wins the Stanley Cup, he is going to be one of those guys that gets that Conn Smythe Trophy consideration, probably along with Vasilevsky. But there's no question that the Tampa Bay Lightning have an incredible amount of forward depth, more than Pittsburgh, more than Boston. And as well as the Islanders defended those two teams at times in that series, it's going to be a more difficult challenge to get them to shut down this 4-line wave that Tampa Bay has. And keep in mind, in the Carolina series, which Tampa Bay won, by the way, in 5 games, which is highly impressive considering, the kind of season Carolina had. One of the top teams in the NHL this season in points, the team that won that division. It was an extremely impressive job by Tampa Bay to finish that series off in 5, and they didn't even get much from Yanni Gourde and Barclay Goodrow and Blake Coleman, the third line for the Lightning in that series. So there's still a lot of room for improvement for them, even with their depth forwards going into this series. What I do like for the New York Islanders, and here's what's going to give them a puncher's chance, they are very, very sturdy defensively. Adam Pelech, Ryan Pulock, guys like that don't get the attention they deserve, league-wide and from pundits, because, I don't know, it's because they're, they're not flashy defensemen. They play for the New York Islanders, which isn't that team that really gets a lot of, national media headlines and accolades. Whatever the case may be, they don't get the recognition for being as good as they are. They have been terrific all season. They have had an outstanding playoffs, both of them on the blue line for the Islanders. Not just them, Nick Leddy's been good. Scott Mayfield's been excellent on the blue line. Like, their collective group on the back end is as solid as it gets in my mind. And it's been very impressive to see, because one of the guys I thought that they were really going to miss on the blue line who went to Colorado in the offseason was Devon Taves. And I thought that would be something that maybe hurts their blue line a bit. Johnny Boychuk retired, of course, as well prior to the season. So there were things that, in my mind, were concerning about the Islanders in terms of, would that blue line be able to be as sturdy as it's been the last couple of years? And the answer is a definitive yes. They have been, and they've proven it here so far in the first 2 rounds of the playoffs. The key for the Islanders is they are actually one of the top teams in the NHL here in the playoffs in terms of offense. And you might be shocked by that because we don't think of the New York Islanders as an offensive juggernaut by any stretch of the imagination. But they have found some offensive mojo in these playoffs. They are scoring goals, and they have scored 4 or 5 goals in multiple games here in these playoffs, and that's got to happen for them here in this series. I don't care what kind of defense they have, and they're good. And obviously, Semyon Varlamov, who has obviously taken back hold of the number 1 spot with his performance in the series against the Bruins. There is no question that this team's pretty solid defensively and goaltending, but there's no question in my mind that they're not going to shut down this Tampa Bay team completely. They're just not going to do it. They're not going to be shutting out Tampa Bay. They're not going to be holding them to 1 goal, even 2 goals. I think is going to be tricky for them to hold Tampa Bay down that much in this series. So it is imperative for the Islanders, that the performances we've gotten from them in these playoffs, from Brock Nelson, especially in the clinching game against Boston, Anthony Beauvillier, Jordan Eberle, Josh Bailey's chipped in some offense in these playoffs. They've even gotten, Cal Clutterbuck scored, a couple of goals for them already in terms of that 4th line with him, Casey Cizikas, and Matt Martin, which is, I think, a very effective 4th line, especially at playoff time. You need those guys to be difference makers offensively here. And more than anything, you need Matthew Barzal, who at the end of the Boston series finally got on track, scored in multiple games, became a much greater presence around the net, going to areas where you need to be, score goals at playoff time. That's the Matt Barzal that the New York Islanders need if they're going to pull off this upset here against the Tampa Bay Lightning. Because like I said, I think the Islanders have to score in this series. They are a defensive-minded team. They can't go into this series thinking we're going to hold the Islanders or the Lightning to 1 goal or 2 goals or shut them out in this series. I think that's an unrealistic expectation with just, how much we have seen from this power play, which has been lethal for the Lightning. That's another key. Carolina got burned repeatedly in the last round, taking too many penalties, going to the box too much, spending too much time shorthanded, and the Tampa Bay Lightning made them pay the ultimate price for it. No question about that. This has got to be a series where if you're Barry Trotz, and he knows this, he even said it, when Bruce Cassidy in the last series made that statement that they're trying to portray themselves like the New York Saints, after Game 5 when he was not too thrilled with the lack of penalties toward the Islanders in that game. Barry Trotz retorted that, we are one of the least penalized teams this season in the NHL, which he was right about. And that's got to continue in this series for the Tampa Bay for the New York Islanders. They were one of the least penalized teams during the season. They're going to have to keep it that way going into this series. They cannot spend too much time in the box. They can't, or else they're going to pay the price for it. And the Bruins power play did connect a couple of times against the Islanders. So, if the Bruins were able to find their way to a couple power play goals in that series, what could the vaunted Tampa Bay Lightning power play do, which is now loaded for bear when you think of, Stamkos and Kucherov coming back and add to it Braden Point, add to it Alex Killorn, add to it Andre Palat, add to it Tyler John, just all the different weapons that the Lightning can put out there on the ice on a power play. Yes, the Islanders, one of the least penalized teams this season. It's got to be that way in this series. It simply has to. If this turns into a special team series and there's lots of penalties and there's lots of opportunities for Tampa Bay on the power play, they won't win this series, the Islanders. It's that simple. So discipline is going to be key for the New York Islanders in this series. Barry Trotz knows that. And because of the fact that you have to rely on the numbers when you preview a series, you have to rely on the fact that the numbers do indicate that the Islanders have been a pretty disciplined team this year. And if that continues, they keep this series at 5-on-5 even strength as much as possible, at least they're going to give themselves a better chance in this series. I think the Islanders push the Lightning. Jimmy was on yesterday. He says he likes the Islanders to pull the upset. I'm stopping short of saying that. I do think Tampa Bay wins this series, but I think it is a longer series and a more competitive series than people think. I have not made a pre-series bet yet in this series, unlike the next series that I'm going to talk about right now, which is the Vegas Golden Knights and the Montreal Canadiens. We have the Vegas Golden Knights anywhere from a minus 450 to minus 550 series favorite here, the Vegas Golden Knights over the Montreal Canadiens. This is the biggest favorite that we have seen in the Stanley Cup semifinal round in 31 years. 1990 is the last time we have seen a team favored by this much in a semifinal series in the Stanley Cup playoffs. So this is rare air. This feels like a price that is more based on the regular seasons of these two teams, to be honest. Like, to me, my jaw hit the floor, seriously, when I saw what the series price was here on Vegas. I only had it minus 375, all right? And I thought I was, a little high on that. And I thought I was disrespecting Montreal a bit too much with the number I had for this series. And then I saw 450, 550 even in some spots. And I'm like, whoa. So obviously the odds makers are really giving Vegas a great deal of respect. And they're really not buying, what Toronto or Montreal's first two series wins against Toronto and Winnipeg a whole lot. And to me, that could be a mistake. There are pathways in this series for Montreal to be competitive and potentially steal this series and win it. And it's very simple why that is. They have committed to team defense. They have committed to being a forecheck, hard-hitting, smash-mouth team. That's what they've become, Montreal. That's really, truly become their identity. Become very, very stout in our own zone, look to capitalize on mistakes of the other team. And when we do that, we'll get our chances and hope we capitalize on them. They're okay with being outshot, in certain games. And they showed it against Winnipeg and especially against Toronto. And they still managed to just in spite of all that, they, helped out Carey Price. They blocked a lot of shots. The big four on the blue line was terrific in the first two rounds for Montreal. Jeff Petrie, Joel Edmondson, Shea Weber, Ben Sherratt. They were absolutely terrific for the Montreal Canadiens. And that's exactly the pathway that they're going to take to try to win this series. Now, the difference is that Vegas is going to play much more the type of hockey that Montreal does, more so than Winnipeg and Toronto did. So this is going to be a greater challenge, I think, for Montreal in that regard, that stylistically, I think they impose their will a lot more on Toronto and Winnipeg than I think they will on this Vegas team. It's hard to impose your will on Vegas because Vegas now has all four of their lines contributing offensively, being a threat and being an impact on the ice. When you're getting your William Carrier, fourth line players of the world on this Vegas team scoring big goals for you like he did in the series clincher against Colorado, it shows you now that depth, which I was concerned about for Vegas much of the playoffs, I was always worried about them being too top heavy and too reliant on Pacioretty, too reliant on Stone, Marchessault, or Smith and Carlson, guys like that. They weren't getting much from the third and the fourth line most of the season. Things have started to change in that regard. And you talk about how good Montreal's been defensively. Vegas can match that. Alec Martinez, Alex Pietrangelo, Braden McNabb, Shea Theodore. That's a pretty damn good foursome on the blue line for Vegas, that can match Montreal. And obviously Marc-Andre Fleury in net, who's been scintillating in these playoffs. He's been outstanding against Carey Price, who's been also outstanding. But, they can match Montreal at that end. So, you look at these teams, it's like mirror images right now. They're teams that have relied on good, steady, sound defense, good enough goaltending, or great goaltending, and then good enough offensive contributions. And both of these teams now are getting a little bit from each line offensively. Montreal is as well. And that's a good thing going into this series because it's going to make it more difficult for Pete DeBoer and the Vegas Golden Knights to match up, which he likes to do. He's a matchup coach. But when you've got Tyler Toffoli and Josh Anderson scoring for you, you've got the youngster Cole Caulfield becoming more and more confident with the puck as the playoffs roll along. You've got all of a sudden Jesperi Kotkaniemi, who didn't have a very good regular season, stepping up, playing better in the playoffs. You got Nick Suzuki playing extremely well with a lot of confidence offensively right now for the Canadiens as well. You've got Yoel Armia and Arturi Lehkonen down the lineup forwards, stepping up and scoring for you as well. You all of a sudden, if you're the Montreal Canadiens, are showing that you've got some serious forward depth at the moment, and forward depth that at the moment is producing and giving you results and making an impact right now. So this, to me, I personally do not see an overwhelming edge for Vegas. I do think they're the better team overall, slightly in terms of the roster, but not by this kind of margin. And again, you're betting prices. When you're talking series price, you're betting teams or you're betting players, you're betting the price. And to me, this is an inflated price on the Vegas Golden Knights. They should be favored. They should not be favored by minus 450 to minus 550. That to me is too much. Way too much, considering what we've seen from Montreal, considering that they're coming off playing their absolute best game of the playoffs when they clinched against Winnipeg. They took overtime to win that game, but it was their best game of the entire playoffs. It was control the flow, control the play from the beginning. And if they bring that again in this series, they're in this series. And they are not the kind of team that should be a plus 425 to plus 450 underdog. If that is the kind of series that they're going to bring to the table here against Vegas. And to me, when I look at it, I give Vegas some slight edges in multiple categories. But when I look at the style of both teams, they played similar mirror image styles in these playoffs. They've really relied on just sturdy defending, great goaltending, and timely scoring. That's been the standard operating procedure for both the Golden Knights and the Canadiens in this series. Montreal, to me, going to get a ton of rest to the point where Jeff Petrie may not even miss a game in this series. That's the biggest injury question mark hanging over the beginning of this series, is whether Jeff Petrie is going to be good to go for game one, but he might be. The one thing that is frustrating, I guess, if you're Montreal, is that this series not starting till Monday means that the Vegas Golden Knights get a chance to really rest up following that Colorado series, which ended Thursday night. They have 3 days off, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and that is significant for them because they were coming off the 7 games against Minnesota. They got no rest whatsoever prior to the start of the Colorado series. They had to go right into it. We saw the negative impact that made on Vegas when they got bombed in game 1 by Colorado. But now they're going to get that rest. They have 3 days off from that game 6 clincher against Colorado to game 1 on Monday night against Montreal. And they don't have to travel because they played game 6 at home. And of course, they're starting game 1 at home. So all of a sudden you thought, man, the rested Montreal would take advantage. No, that's not the case. Vegas will have enough rest, 3 days off, to feel a lot fresher than they would have been otherwise for a game 1 in this series. So that's the one thing, because I thought a few days ago you could have said, especially if it goes 7 games, Montreal could have been really, really live in game 1. They still might be, but now I'm a little bit hesitant. We'll get more into game 1 specifically on Monday's show. As far as the series goes, I've made 3 bets actually. I have sprinkled a little on Montreal at plus 450. Just a small bet, a quarter unit bet, that's all. But I have 1 unit on Montreal plus 2.5 games, minus 145, which I think is a great price. All Montreal has to do is not lose this series in 5 games or less, and that bet cashes. And I think we've got a great chance for this series to go 6 or 7 games. So the unit structure for me for this series is Montreal plus 2.5 games at minus 145, series handicap, that for 1 unit. Then I go a half a unit on Montreal plus 1.5 games, plus 175 is the price for that. So this series goes 7 games, regardless of the winner. That bet cashes, which I like quite a bit. A great price too. 7-game series plus 175. Montreal plus 1.5 games. That was pretty good. And then a quarter unit, as I mentioned, on Montreal at the big price, plus 450. I think they're right there with Vegas in this series. Now, maybe I'll be proven wrong. Maybe Montreal will show that the North Division was fool's gold all season, and they're just too weak to deal with this Vegas team, which is a physical, hard forechecking group. Something that, to be honest with you, Montreal did not see that kind of team in either Toronto or Winnipeg. That is a little bit of a underlying concern in the pit of my stomach. But to me, they are in this series big time against Vegas with the way they're playing, with the way they're all of a sudden getting their youngsters stepping up, how the old vets like Corey Perry and Eric Stahl have become difference makers for the Montreal Canadiens in these playoffs. I think they're in this series and have a puncher's chance in it. So I'm looking at those 3 bets for the Canadiens. The smallest one being the series win, plus 450. then a half unit on Montreal plus 1.5 games, plus 175, and then 1 unit Montreal plus 2.5 games, minus 145. That is the way I'm going in that series with Montreal Vegas. Should be a good one. Look, and both series should be really good. I'm looking forward to both of them. All right, let's talk game one specifically for the New York Islanders and the Tampa Bay Lightning. This comes your way tomorrow, Sunday afternoon, 3 p.m. Eastern time. We have in game one, Tampa Bay minus 200, home favorites, 5.5 the total, shaded to the under. I definitely lean over the total here in game one. You've got an afternoon game. I could see this game being a little bit of a helter-skelter, up and down affair. The New York Islanders, by the way, 2-0 over the total in game ones in their first 2 rounds of the Stanley Cup playoffs. Tampa Bay went 1 over, 1 under. Tampa Bay, Carolina, game one stayed under the total, but Tampa Bay, Florida, game one in the first round flew over the total. And look, the New York Islanders have just been one of those teams where the value on them from a totals perspective, game by game in these playoffs, has been over. It really has, and they've been trending that way in recent games. And like I say, the Islanders' offense is always thought of as, a little bit subpar, below average. In these playoffs, they have been one of the highest scoring teams in these Stanley Cup playoffs, the New York Islanders. And you'd be surprised by that, but you go back to the Pittsburgh series, they scored, their share of goals more than a lot of people expected. Same thing against the Boston Bruins. Now you could say Bruins banged up blue line, Bruins turnovers. Yeah, but guess what? Islanders took advantage, and that's all you can do. You got to take advantage of the situations. Yeah, Bruins had a couple of starting D-men out. Important D-men, by the way, Carlo and Miller. Yeah, they made some mistakes, but the Islanders took advantage of them. And like I said earlier, the Islanders' top players, they all played very well offensively in that Boston series, especially down the stretch. With Tampa Bay being off for a little bit. Remember, Tampa Bay, this will be their first game in almost a week. They wrapped it up with Carolina last Monday, so it's going to be 6 days between games for them. I think they could be a little bit at the back end, a little sloppy. And let's not forget game one. Remember that game that stayed under, Tampa Bay, Carolina? If Carolina had a million chances in that first period against Vasilevsky, and he was so good that he just shut the door, but it could have been 2 or 3-0 Carolina after that first period. And we're talking about a different kind of flow, because if they get those 2-3 goals early in that game, Tampa Bay has to open it up, take chances, and then all of a sudden you get more goals in that game than you did. So that's going to be the key. I think the Islanders, can they get that early goal, maybe put some pressure on the Lightning. For me, from a side perspective, it's dog or pass in game one. This could be a spot where the Isles could steal one, because they've had some time off without it being a rest situation. Whereas for Tampa Bay, when you're talking now 6 days off, it really could be a rust situation. Think of what it was like for Winnipeg. That first game they played against Montreal in the second round, they had a ton of time off after sweeping Edmonton, and they didn't look all that sharp early in that game, and Montreal kind of jumped on them. So I think I might sprinkle on Islanders first period in this game more than the full game. Just that first period bet, which is plus 145, that does interest me a little bit. Islanders plus 145 first period game one. Lean to the Islanders full game, and I do like over the total here, which you can get at plus 120 over 5.5 here in this game. It makes sense to me that game one in this series, first game, could get sloppy play both sides, particularly again 6 days off for Tampa. Enough days where 3-4 days it's rest. You're starting to talk about 6 days, 7 days. You're talking about a full week since you played a game. Then it becomes more concerning that it could be more rust that you see from Tampa Bay than rest here in game one. And I think you might see that show up in terms of maybe the mistakes, passes not clicking. And again, if you're turning the puck over and passes aren't clicking, it can put your defense in a tough spot and maybe be on both sides, really, and maybe have both teams that capitalize. And of course, the Lightning, at home, they've found ways to score goals in the majority of their home games. Like I say, the Islanders have been very good defensively all season. Playoffs pretty solid. But look, the Islanders defense and Semyon Varlamov, for that matter, they are going to have a much greater challenge here against a Tampa Bay team that can have 1 through 12 in their forward group score goals. That can have Victor Hedman be a difference maker on the back end from an offensive standpoint. Mikhail Sergachev, same thing. I mean, they've got blue liners that not only carry the puck, but they get in on the offense as well, way more than Boston's blue liners do. I mean, Boston has McAvoy to be, I think, a difference maker offensively for them. That's about it. I mean, it is just so much more that the Islanders have to concern themselves with defensively in this series against the Tampa Bay Lightning. So that's the concern. But I do think that first period bet on the Islanders is a good one. You catch Tampa Bay at their worst in the first 20 minutes. Think about Game 1, Tampa Bay, Carolina. Think about that. If you can recall it like I can, just put yourself in that position right now. Think about how Tampa Bay, Carolina Game 1 played out. Tampa Bay was dominated in that first period of Game 1, following a bit of a layoff. And yeah, it was scoreless after the first period, but Carolina should have been up. They should have been up. They had a ton of chance. They hit a post or two. Vasilevsky was incredible. That's the kind of thing the New York Islanders could do, jump on them in that first period. But after that, we did see Tampa Bay really get stronger, really get better in Game 1 against Carolina, second period, third period. So that is why I like that first period situation for the New York Islanders here at plus 145 in Game 1. So I'll be on that, and I'll also be looking at over 5.5 plus 120 in Game 1 between the New York Islanders and the Tampa Bay Lightning. All right, that is going to wrap it up for the Saturday edition of the Ice Guys show. Unfortunately, Alex couldn't make it, but we'll get Alex back on Monday. We'll get his thoughts on the series for Montreal Vegas. I'm sure he'll tweet out some thoughts for the Islanders and the Lightning as well as Game 1 as well. So definitely make sure you check out Alex on Twitter at AXSmithSports. Follow him there on Twitter. As far as best bets go, we'll get to that in just a second. I do have a best bet for this show, even though there's no games today. But before we get there, a reminder, download the DraftKings Sportsbook app, sign up for an account, use the promo code THPN, NHL Stanley Cup playoffs, NBA playoffs, MLB on a daily basis. Great time of year. We've got, obviously, U.S. Open golf next week, the next major. Football is only 2 months away, so it's not too soon to start thinking about football. Great time of year to check out DraftKings. When you download the app and sign up for an account, you'll get deposit bonuses, weekly specials, weekly incentives, bet boosts, and a whole lot more. So download the DraftKings Sportsbook app, sign up for an account, use the promo code THPN. All right, best bet. Let's go to Game 1 tomorrow. New York Islanders, Tampa Bay Lightning. New York Islanders, plus 145, first period against the Tampa Bay Lightning. I'm going to go with that. I like that. I like that bet. I like the spot. I like just having the first period because I think Tampa Bay might come out slow. They've had the 6 days off. The Islanders, off the adrenaline of beating Boston in the last round. Jump on the Lightning early. Carolina did that in Game 1 against Tampa in the second round. They didn't have any goals to show for it, but man, did they have their chances. They were buzzing in that first period against Tampa Bay. They just couldn't cash in. Hopefully the Islanders do cash in. We are shockingly talking about the New York Islanders as one of the top offensive teams still standing here in the Stanley Cup playoffs. Hopefully they can chip in a goal or two and have the lead after the first period of Game 1. That's what I like here. New York Islanders plus 145 first period against the Tampa Bay Lightning. That'll be my best bet for this edition of the Ice Guys. And again, that's Game 1 of Islanders Lightning Sunday afternoon. All right, that'll wrap up this edition of the Ice Guys. Thanks to everyone for tuning in. A reminder, the Ice Guys is live 7 days a week, Monday to Friday, 2 p.m. Eastern, Saturday, Sunday, noon Eastern. If you can't watch the show live, make sure you download the Ice Guys podcast in audio form on all major podcast platforms, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, and iHeart. Make sure you check out the podcast if you can't watch the show live on YouTube on all those platforms. Thanks for watching. I'm Ian Cameron. Have a great weekend. A reminder, there is no Ice Guys show on Sunday, but we will be back and talk to you again on Monday for another edition of the Ice Guys presented by the Hockey Podcast Network.